our inaugural Innovation Speakers Forum. Uh, Delighted you could join us here today for this new platform showcasing groundbreaking businesses and their products, services, and ideas taking place right here in Skagit County. Today we're excited to welcome executives from 4 Skagit County businesses at the cutting edge of their industries and making both regional and global impacts. Our first speaker today is Adam Floyd, Vice President for Business Development at Skagit Valley Malting. Skagit Valley Malting has quite a story to tell. Even if this is the first time you're hearing of them, there's a good chance you've already enjoyed the fruits of their efforts as they're increasingly a supplier of choice to craft breweries and distilleries all around the country. A couple of quick ground rules before we begin. First, this presentation is being recorded, and we hope to make it available on our website later. Just keep in mind any side chats you have might get picked up by our microphone. Second, though I defer to our speaker on this, please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. We have a really ambitious schedule this afternoon. We'd like to get through the presentations before we open the floor to a great discussion. With that, please welcome Adam Floyd.
All right, thanks. So, I am Adam, and I am the VP of Business Development at Skagit Valley Malting. A little unique title because it's not just sales. We are such a fast-growing company that a lot of our business development happens on the farming side, it happens on the product development side, and then it happens in sales too. And so I'm trying to serve all those roles in that space and not just be focused on outward sales, but also we have such a deep connection to our source ingredient that we need to continue to build strong farm relationships and source the right kind of products that work well with our technology. So typically, before I even get started, and I've been accused of this many times, is I will just go off talking about malt in a way that only probably brewers and distillers would understand without even making sure that everybody understands what malt is in general. So malt is short for maltose, and basically what we are doing is we are controlling the germination process. We put wheat and barley in our machines. We give it an environment where it feels like it's going to grow. It starts to grow. It starts to form rootlets. And then we control that germination so that we have access to the starch packets. And those then become either sugars or the access to sugars that feed the yeast that create alcohol. And that's malt. So again, malt, short for maltose. And what we're trying to do is control germination. That's kind of that's the magic. And that really also, as I talk about this, is the key to the technology and then really the key to our future too, and why this business is so exciting beyond beer and whiskey and then the other products that we're coming out with and the other products that we're developing right now. So a little bit of the history. I just going to put the brochure up here, and I'm probably going to go backwards on this. Oh, let me make sure that's on. Because there is a section in here that I like to start with that has to do with collaboration. It's going to make me go forward. That's okay. And I will jump over there. So, and you're not going to be able to read that, but so I'll just put it on the photo. The reason that Skagit Valley Malting was created in the first place was to be a benefit to the farmers. Farming in this valley has actually been a big part of farming has been the growing of different rotation crops, whether it's legumes, whether it's wheat or barley. They need those items to bring nutrients back into the soils when they're growing higher value crops like potatoes or tulips right now, or other seed crops. And so there was really no avenue other than commodity animal feed markets to sell that wheat and barley. Especially when the peas moved out of the valley. There used to be a large pea processor. That's a big history of the valley. And so when peas moved out of the valley, there was no real avenue for value-added processing, especially in grains. And the highest form of value-add processing in grains is malting. So a couple guys in this region here. One is Wayne Carpenter, who started Skagit Valley Malting. The other is Dr. Steve Jones at the Bread Lab. Many of you guys have probably met Steve or have met Wayne or heard Wayne speak in the past. They got together, they looked at the region, they looked at all of the grain that was being grown, and they thought, well, this is basically Scotland when it comes to latitude. And they have been making malt and really great beers and whiskey for a very long time. Why can't we do it here? We have the same growing conditions, and then we have something really special where we have a wheat and barley that is different than what grows on the east side of the mountains, different than what grows in Alberta and all the way down to Texas. What we have here is a low-protein coastal grain that is specifically beneficial to brewers and distillers because that lower protein packet gives brewers and distillers more flexibility, gives them more control over their brewing process. There's a whole other reason why big malting, as far as commodity malt, grains that, again, come from kind of middle America, middle Canada, the reason they work is because they're able to find varieties that will, again, grow in all those different regions, but at the end, when it reaches the malt house, they perform the same. And so they're on the hunt for varieties, or they're doing varietal breeding, where they're trying to find or create sameness. Sameness that goes into a system that then allows Budweiser to taste the same, whether it's made in LA or whether it's made in London. They want that to be the same. The reason that we were created was to treat barley like a grape. And we have this opportunity because there's 30,000 varieties of barley alone in the nation, in the world's seed banks, that we know grains grow differently here. We know that varieties, much like grapes, have impact on flavor. And so we were kind of tasked to build a system that would, one, take advantage of some technology that didn't exist and was created, but then two, to also go on that varietal hunt and find varieties that would grow here, that would last here, and then that would make really great beer and really great whiskey, and give those brewers and distillers a new choice in varieties that they never really thought was possible in the past. So on to the technology of what we do, and this is really important. That says innovate, so that's great. I have some brochures for everybody to take a look at if you're interested when it's over too. But so those machines, that thing you see in the watermark in the background, just to give you a little bit of history, traditionally malting is done on large heated floors, right? So they create that growing environment in a bed, a heated bed, and it goes through rakes, and they keep that grain agitated so it doesn't weave together and create turf, basically. And then they are able to do the steeping and the heating and the germination and the killing later in the process on many different steps. What we were looking to do, and what Wayne decided to grab a group of innovators around here to do, because they weren't burdened by prior knowledge, these guys knew what the chemistry of malt was, but had no reason to follow previous ways of doing it. They wanted to create an all-in-one malt machine. And even though that had been kind of thought of before, no one had really ever done it in the way that we were able to perform it. And so we got these machines created by our staff. We actually fabricate these machines in our facility. And they do all 5 phases of malt in one vessel. So it does the washing when it comes in raw. It does the steeping to get it ready for germination. Then it is the vessel in which it germinates. Then it does the kilning, so we start to hit it with heat, and that is what turns the starches to sugars. That's where you start to create malt instead of just sprouted materials. And then we do the polishing, the final tumble, so that it looks like a great product, and you're not just getting a bag of what would also be dust and little rootlets that grew on the grain at that time. So we have 19 patents on that machine. It actually just happened like 2 months ago. It was patent pending, and now it's been approved for 19 different claims. And we have currently 3 of them, with 2 more in production. So those do 20,000 pound batches of barley that turns into malt, which again is another reason that makes us a beneficial company to our market, which is craft brewers and craft distillers. If they were to go to a large malting company and ask for something unique, something a little different, something that would fit a task that they've been put on or an idea that they have for a brew, they would have to buy roughly 300,000 pounds worth to get a single batch made for them. So our buy-in level is much more appropriate for that industry, for craft brewers and distillers. And just to give you a little sense of what that market is, from Vancouver to Portland, basically, lower BC, all of Washington, most of northern Oregon, 40 million pounds of malt is consumed annually by craft brewing alone. So that's a pretty significant amount of grain. If we were 10% of that market, so 10% of our core region, we would be roughly 3 times the size we are today. So the opportunity in front of us is great. There's no reason that we couldn't be 10%. We have a premium product. We're doing something really special with the only local supply. And then there's no expectation that it's going to shrink. Every day, new breweries are growing. There's 400 breweries in the state of Washington. It's averaged about 1 a month. What's that, Mike? He's got an exact number. 362. So roughly 400. I said it will be 400 soon because last year it averaged 1 a month, 52 new, or 1 a week. It was 52 new breweries. So, anyways, the size is great. We're having great success up in Vancouver, all the way down to Portland and throughout the Puget Sound. And so the other question we get quite often is, so you have a lot of market share available. Do you have the grain available to make that happen? And luckily we do. Right now, we're not even 5% of the fields that are growing grain currently are selling to us as malt. So, and because we pay the farmers almost 3 times what they get in the animal feed market, we have growers lining up at the door ready to sell to us when we're ready to buy. And so there's really no limit currently for us to be quite a large player in our region, and we don't have the desire or the need to go really beyond our region either to supply that product. Let me see, one of the things that, I mentioned this earlier, and I think it's pretty important to understand why, again, this is so special, is when you think about the grains that are grown, and again, from Alberta to Texas, what they're growing is an approved 6 varieties. Those 6 varieties have been picked by a panel called AMBA, the American Malt Barley Association. And what they've done is they've picked, and this is, there's no negatives to this, it's actually amazing that they can grow grain from this massive region and have it all perform very similar. But again, they're looking for similarities. Whereas we're trying to find things that they reject. We're trying to find seeds that seed breeders have grown for the first time. And we're looking for differences. So I'm looking to find grains that will pull those flags far apart as possible so that we have color, we have flavor, we have performance differences that would never work inside of a large commodity system. And what, again, makes that important is that gives us the ability to expand our knowledge base here, and it makes this region a really special place for testing and growing, and that's where our partnership with WSU comes in, partnership with other growers, our partnership with OSU, Oregon State University, is a big barley hub as well. And so we've learned all this, and we've been able to build this team. And again, without the Economic Development Council, without the Port of Skagit, without WSU, Skagit Valley Malting really probably wouldn't exist. We exist because these partnerships are here. We exist because we've been able to reach into funding. We have a home like the Port of Skagit. We have neighbors like WSU. And together, I mean, I think out of anybody in the port, the immediate success of Skagit Valley Malting was really a result of that combo work that happened here. How about on time? About good? 5 minutes? Okay, great. So the future of Skagit Valley Malting, even though we've talked about beer and whiskey, there's also a really exciting piece to what we do that's just kind of a starting item for us. Again, I called it controlled germination because an early part of what happens in those machines is the sprouting of grains. And those sprouted grains are kind of a big thing when it comes to bread or granola bars and other food items, where they're looking for a food-safe way to do what people have been doing for thousands of years, sticking grain in a bucket of water, sprouting it so it's more digestible, so that the nutrients that are already in the grains are more easily accessible to the human body. And so there's pretty well known what those benefits are. We're just starting to do kind of the lab work to test that and to prove that. But one of the things that has been hard to do is find a supplier that has something like a closed vessel that could do a food-safe sprouting environment and provide a sprouted good to a flour partner that could then go make bread. And so we just got started with Dave's Killer Bread, making our first batches of sprouted grain, and we are pretty certain that eventually we'll be producing more sprouted grains for a much larger industry when it comes to bread and snack foods than what we do currently in beer or whiskey. Not that it'll take anything away from that, but the future of what we're doing is really exciting because we're expanding off into other larger markets and even growing further into what this valley is capable of growing. So that hopefully, maybe some questions. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Yeah, please. So the question was about our technology and if we are planning on licensing that or selling it. More than just selling machines and becoming a fabricator of machines as a business plan, our goal would be to partner with, I think a good example would be a large, either a large farm or a large flour mill that wanted to do that processing in-house because they have their own unique story, their own unique valley of grains that they're pulling from. And then it would be more of a licensing agreement. And that's definitely a big part of, but it's the whole reason we went down that patented path for that.
How long is the process from start to finish?
That's a great question. So malting takes about 8 days. So from raw grain to finished malt, and it doesn't matter if it's in our machines or if it's at big malt houses. Nature kind of dictates that. So germination takes what germination takes, and kilning takes what it takes. So everybody in malting takes about 8 days to create a finished product.
What are the tools or the challenges you have to educate people who know nothing about this and build that community?
It's interesting because I came in without this as a background. Beer is not my background, nor are grains. My background more is on the food side and specifically in meat. So to end up here was interesting, but and then it's a different talk, longer story. But there's still for us a need to connect with the end consumer. We feel that. I think it's one of the biggest opportunities we saw, or I saw when I came in to take over, the sales department, was we should be part of the brewing community, not just a supplier to brewers. And so we've been trying to do more tap takeovers. We have a much larger social media platform than anybody else in our position. And we're really here to, I think, lift up our brewing partners and our distilling partners more than, having a retail face. But people are really interested in what we do, so we try to focus that through our brewers. But hosting events like this, and we do this at homebrew clubs, and I've done this at a number of different breweries, and then I'll do a talk to try to help people understand, because there's a lot of work that gets done on understanding hops. And hops gets a lot of attention in the state of Washington. But what we're doing is starting to really change that, because we have that same level of impact here, and we're 100% local. 96% of what we do comes out of this valley. And then the other 4% comes from the other side of the mountains. But either way, it's the state of Washington, and we're just as local, and I think just as important. All right. Thank you so much.
Adam, thanks very much for a fascinating introduction to what Skagit Malting is doing.